My first instinct was to run when I saw them coming. The dust clouds in the distance meant riders approaching fast, and in this part of Arizona territory in 1871, that rarely brought good news. I stood frozen on our homestead porch, watching the horizon darken with the approaching Apache warriors. My husband Thomas had ridden to Tucson for supplies 3 days ago. I was alone with our 2-year-old daughter Emma. I should have grabbed Emma and hidden in the root cellar. I should have run to the neighbors 2 miles east. I should have done anything but stand there, paralyzed by fear, as 12 Apache riders surrounded our small wooden home that sat isolated on the harsh desert landscape we'd foolishly believed we could tame. Their leader dismounted, his dark eyes fixing on mine. He wore no war paint, which I'd heard meant they weren't necessarily looking for blood. Still, my heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. "White woman," he said in broken English. "Come." I clutched Emma tighter to my chest. "Please," I whispered. "We have nothing of value." He gestured impatiently toward his horse. The other warriors remained expressionless, waiting. I understood, then, that refusal wasn't an option. With trembling hands, I gathered Emma's small blanket, a cloth doll, and the locket containing a portrait of my mother. The warrior watched, unmoved by my tears or the child's frightened whimpers. As we rode away, I looked back once at the home Thomas and I had built with such hope. The warriors set it ablaze, orange flames licking at the dry timber. Black smoke spiraled into the cloudless sky, a signal to anyone searching that everything that had once been there was now gone. We rode for days, heading south into what I believed was Mexico. Emma cried until exhaustion claimed her, then slept fitfully against my chest as I balanced precariously behind the warrior who'd taken us. My thighs burned from the unfamiliar position, and my fair skin blistered under the relentless sun. I'd never ridden without a saddle before. By nightfall, I could barely stand when they finally allowed us to dismount. At the Apache camp, women emerged from hide-covered structures, regarding me with curious, sometimes hostile stares. Children pointed and whispered. I was led to a small wickiup on the outskirts of the encampment. An older woman waited inside, her face a map of deep wrinkles, her eyes surprisingly kind. "I am Naz Shah," she said in clear English that startled me. "You stay here now." "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking from thirst and fear. "Why am I here?" She handed me a water skin. "Cochise lost daughter to white soldiers. You replace." I nearly dropped Emma. "I'm a replacement? For his daughter?" Naz Shah nodded solemnly. "His grandson needs mother. You have child. You know how." The realization struck me like a physical blow. I wasn't merely a captive. I was expected to become a member of their family, to mother a child, not my own, while raising Emma among people who had torn us from our home. That night, I wept silently as Emma slept beside me. I thought of Thomas returning to our burning homestead, believing us dead or worse. I wondered if search parties would form, if anyone would even think to look south of the border. I considered escape, but the desert itself was as much a prison as the watchful eyes of the warriors. Days turned to weeks. I learned that the boy, Taki, was 4 years old. His mother had been killed during a cavalry attack on a previous camp. He was solemn, with serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. At first, he regarded me with suspicion, hiding behind Naz Shah whenever I approached. Gradually, I began to understand the rhythm of life in the camp. The women worked constantly, gathering wild plants, preparing food, tanning hides, weaving baskets. They spoke little to me, but watched approvingly when I began to assist with these tasks. My hands, once soft from relatively genteel life as a settler's wife, grew calloused and strong. Emma adjusted faster than I did. She played with the Apache children, picking up their language with the ease only the very young possess. Sometimes I would catch her babbling happily in a mixture of English and Apache, and my heart would break anew. Would she even remember her father? Would she grow up thinking this was where she belonged? 3 months after our capture, Taki approached me as I sat grinding mesquite beans in a flour. Without a word, he settled beside me and began helping, his small hands mimicking my movements. When he finished, He looked up at me expectantly. "Thank you," I said in his language, one of the few phrases I'd mastered. He nodded solemnly. "My grandmother says you cry when you think no one sees." I stilled, unsure how to respond to such directness from a child. "I used to cry too," he continued. "My mother won't come back. Will yours?" The simple question, laden with his own grief, cracked something inside me. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I hope so." He considered this, then reached for my hand. His small fingers wrapped around mine, warm and surprisingly strong. "Until then, we can help each other." That night, when Emma was asleep, I sat outside our wickiup watching the stars. They were the same stars that shone over Thomas, wherever he was. The same stars that had guided me throughout my life in Pennsylvania, then as a newlywed traveling west, and now as a captive in this foreign place. Something about their constancy comforted me. Nazcha joined me, offering a blanket against the desert night's chill. "Your heart is pulled in two directions," she observed. "I miss my husband," I admitted. "My home." She nodded, unsurprised. "The white woman taken before you felt the same." For many seasons. I turned to her, suddenly alert. There was another? What happened to her? She became Chiricahua. Had 3 children. When soldiers came offering to take her back, she refused. Nasha studied my face. Some wounds healed better in new soil. I couldn't imagine ever choosing to stay, yet something in her words resonated uncomfortably. The truth was, Thomas and I had been struggling. The harsh realities of frontier life had worn away the romantic notions that had brought us west. Our arguments had grown more frequent, his drinking heavier. The night before he left for Tucson, he'd struck me for the first time. 6 months passed. I learned to ride bareback, to identify edible plants in the desert, to speak enough Apache to communicate my basic needs. Taki began sleeping in our wickiup, curled beside Emma like a protective older brother. He called me mother in his language, and though I gently corrected him at first, eventually I stopped. One evening, while teaching me to weave a basket, Nasha told me about her son, the warrior who had taken me. His name was Nilchi, and he was Cochise's nephew. He had lost his wife to smallpox years before. I noticed him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable. The revelation that he was not merely my captor, but also somehow meant to become my husband sent me into a panic. "I'm already married," I protested. "To a man who has not found you," she replied simply. "Life continues, Sarah, even in grief." I was startled to hear my name. I hadn't been called Sarah since my capture, having been given an Apache name that meant sunrise woman for my red gold hair. That night, Nilchi approached our wickiup. He carried something wrapped in a cloth. Without speaking, he handed it to me, a wooden doll he had carved for Emma. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the features delicate. Emma seized it with delight. "Thank you," I said in his language. He nodded once. "Tomorrow we move camp. Winter comes." I noticed the preparations, the dismantling of structures, the packing of belongings. "Where will we go?" "Higher ground. Better shelter from cold winds." He hesitated, then added, "Your man came to the border trading post, asking questions." My heart leapt. "Thomas? He's looking for me." Nilchi's expression darkened. "He trades whiskey to others for information. Speaks of reward for white woman and child. Not of love." I wanted to deny it, to defend Thomas, but the words caught in my throat. Was he truly searching for us, or for the compensation the government might provide for our return? The doubt itself felt like a betrayal. The winter camp was in a sheltered canyon, protected from the worst of the winds. The wickiups here were more substantial, partially dug into the ground for insulation. Emma thrived despite the colder weather, running with the other children, her skin darkened by the sun, her English increasingly peppered with Apache words. Taki became my shadow, eager to show me everything he knew about their winter customs. He taught me to identify animal tracks in the light snow that occasionally dusted the higher elevations, to predict weather changes by watching birds and insects. His trust in me grew, and with it, my responsibility toward him. One frigid night, as we huddled around the fire inside our wickiup, Emma sleeping soundly, Taki asked me a question that stopped my breath. If your husband comes, will you take me too? I stared at him, this solemn child who had somehow wound himself around my heart. Taki, I will be good, he promised earnestly. I would learn white ways. I would protect Emma. I pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders beneath my arm. It's not that simple, I said softly. But wasn't it? If I had the chance to escape, could I leave this child behind? The answer frightened me more than any warrior ever had. Spring came, painting the desert in brief, spectacular color. We returned to the lower camp, and with the change in season came increased interaction with Mexican traders. News filtered through. The U.S. Army was pushing harder against the Apache, treaties were being broken, reservations proposed. Tension grew within the camp. One evening, Nilchi returned from a hunting expedition with a wound in his side, not from an animal, but from a white settler's bullet. As I helped Nazcha tend to him, using the medicinal knowledge she'd been teaching me, he gripped my wrist. They search closer now, he said through gritted teeth. For you. Hope and dread tangled in my chest. How do you know? Your name. They call it. Offer many things for your return. I cleaned his wound in silence, my thoughts churning. After a year in captivity, I was no longer the same woman who had been taken. My hands were strong and capable, my skin weathered, my understanding of survival fundamentally altered. Could I return to a life of parlors and propriety? Would Thomas even recognize the woman I'd become? More troubling was the question of Emma. She spoke more Apache than English now, called Taki her brother, ran wild and free in a way no proper white child would be permitted. Uprooting her again seemed another kind of cruelty. 2 weeks later, as I collected water from the stream with other women, rifle shots shattered the morning calm. Soldiers, a small contingent that must have tracked the hunting party back to our location. Women scattered, grabbing children. I froze. Emma clutched to my chest as 2 uniformed men spotted me. Ma'am, are you Sarah Mitchell? One called, advancing cautiously. Hearing my maiden name was like a physical shock. I hadn't been Sarah Mitchell for nearly 5 years, not since marrying Thomas. Yes, I found myself answering. I am. We've come to rescue you, ma'am. Your husband's been searching for over a year. Behind me, I could hear the camp in chaos, shouting, children crying. Somewhere among them was Taki. Nazcha, Nilchi, my daughter, I said, indicating Emma. The soldier nodded. The child too, of course. Hurry now, before they regroup. I stood rooted, unable to move forward or back. There's a boy, I began. The second soldier grew impatient. Ma'am, we need to move. Now, there's a boy, I repeated more firmly. I won't leave without him. They exchanged glances. An Apache boy? Ma'am, we can't just, then I stay, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. I stay with my children. The first soldier, younger than the other, hesitated. Mrs. Mitchell, are you under some kind of compulsion? These savages are people, I finished, with names and hearts and children who need mothers. I will not leave the boy who calls me mother. While they debated what to do with my unexpected resistance, Nazcha appeared at the edge of the clearing, Taki's hand firmly in hers. Her eyes met mine, questioning. I gave a slight nod. She approached slowly, pushing Taki toward me. The soldiers raised their rifles, but I stepped between them. This is my son, I said firmly, gathering Taki to my side where Emma already clung. Where I go, he goes. The older soldier spat on the ground. Your husband didn't mention adopting an Apache whelp. My husband doesn't know many things, I replied coldly, including that I might have changed as much as he has. In the end, they relented, more from a need to retreat before Apache warriors returned than from any sympathy for my situation. As we rode away, Taki silent and terrified behind one soldier, Emma with me on another horse. I looked back at the only home my daughter clearly remembered. Nazcha stood watching, her hand raised not in farewell, but in blessing. Behind her, emerging from the trees, was Nilchi. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. I touched my heart once, an acknowledgement of what might have been in another life, then turned away. The journey to the cavalry outpost, took 3 days. Taki spoke not a word, eating little, watching everything with wary eyes. Emma chattered nervously, confused by the strange men and the tension she could sense in me. I whispered to them both in Apache at night, promising protection, wondering how I would keep such a vow. At the outpost, Thomas waited. He'd aged a decade in a year, his face weathered, his frame thinner. When he saw me, something like relief washed over his features, quickly followed by confusion as he noted my changed appearance, the Apache-style dress, my braided hair. "Sarah," he said hoarsely. Thank God. I stood before him, a stranger in familiar skin. "Thomas." His eyes moved to Emma, who regarded him without recognition, then to Taki, who stared back defiantly despite his fear. "What is this?" Thomas demanded, gesturing toward Taki. "Why is there an Indian boy with you?" "He's my son now," I said simply. "Our son." Thomas's face darkened, the expression I'd grown to fear before my capture. "You've lost your mind. The savages have addled your brain." "No," I said quietly. "They've cleared it." In the commander's office later, as papers were processed for our rescue, Thomas continued to protest the inclusion of Taki in our family. The boy understood enough English to know he was unwanted and pressed closer to my side. "He goes where we go," I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Or Emma and I don't go at all. You'd choose a savage over your husband?" Thomas hissed, mindful of the officers nearby. I met his gaze steadily. "I'd choose a child who needs me over a man who sees me as property to be recovered." The commander, a weary man who had clearly seen enough conflict, intervened. "The boy can accompany you to Tucson. What happens after is a domestic matter." That night, in the sparse quarters provided for us, I sat with both children as they finally slept. Thomas paced outside, drinking from a flask he thought I hadn't noticed. The familiar smell of whiskey brought back memories of our homestead, of arguments and growing discontent. I knew then that I would not return to that life. The woman who could accept Thomas's drinking, his rages, his control, she had died in the desert and been reborn as someone stronger. In the morning, I approached the commander alone. "I wish to file for divorce," I said without preamble. His eyebrows rose. "Ma'am, after all your husband's done to find you, he found me because there was a reward," I interrupted, "and because a man's pride can't bear the thought of his wife living among Indians." I placed a small pouch on his desk, silver jewelry given to me by Nasha before my departure. "I need passage to California for myself and my children. Both of them." He studied me for a long moment. "You understand what people will say? About you? About the boy?" I straightened my shoulders. "I understand that some scars are visible and some are not. I understand that freedom comes in many forms, and sometimes the worst captivity is the one we choose for ourselves." 2 weeks later, we boarded a stagecoach bound for California. Thomas had raged, threatened, and finally offered a cold indifference that confirmed every reason for my decision. The divorce proceedings were initiated, my maiden name reclaimed for myself and extended to both children. As the stagecoach pulled away from Tucson, Emma chattered excitedly about the journey ahead. Taki remained vigilant, still uncertain of his place in this new reality, but gradually accepting that I would not abandon him. I watched the desert landscape roll past, so similar to the one where I had been reborn. "Will we ever go back?" Taki asked suddenly, his first voluntary words in English since our rescue. I followed his gaze toward the distant mountains. "To the Apache?" He nodded. "Perhaps someday," I said truthfully, "when it's safer, when the world is different." He considered this, then placed his small hand in mine. "Nasha said you would choose. That the spirits showed her your heart was already Apache before you knew." I smiled, touching the small pouch of desert sand I wore around my neck. A parting gift from Nilchi, delivered silently through Nasha. "The Apache took the white woman across the border," I said softly. "She never asked to go back." California promised a new beginning, far from the judgments of those who would never understand how captivity had set me free, how losing everything had given me the courage to choose what truly mattered. As the desert gave way to new landscapes, I held my children close, grateful for the journey that had brought me not home, but to myself,